Okay, so just a recap on part one. Anneke began talking about the early journey of how all of her involvement in the child sex slavery began when she was in Belgium. A couple of the little things that are interesting just to mention is that, you know, a lot of times as people get into this stuff, like, or are pushed into it, or even looking at some of the people that are involved, we start to realize it's not like there's typically much of a choice, and it's not like sometimes it doesn't just go from you're not in it to you're fully in it. Sometimes it's a process that unfolds that slowly sort of tinkers people into the entire process, which happens on both ends of this entire thing. And as Anneke is going to discuss as we further get into her story, there's going to be incredibly important nuances that she's had the wisdom to understand and to reflect on that are very important for us as viewers to this to understand. So please pay close attention to the stuff that she shares in this next part. And again, be sure to stick around because this does get pretty heavy as we get into this. And we're going to, kind of go through a little bit of a meditation at the end of this so that we can make sure that we process the various feelings that are coming up.
I'd like to take us back to the story.
Because it's not done.
Of the chronology.
Yes. So chronologically. So that was that American man who dumped me there in Germany, and then somehow he must not have spoken to the leader of the network. Maybe he felt it as a personal failure, I don't know, but he didn't say anything. So I was still used in the network in Belgium, but I was never taken, so I never saw the American again. But somehow the experiences had given me some, as a child there, some kind of reputation with the leader there, who now started to use me every time there was a visit from VIPs. So I was used. So I have recognized a lot of world leaders, visible or not so visible, but I found a lot of very easy to find. Right. And then when I was 10, someone came in at an orgy, very different, came with his father, was taken there for the first time by his father, who was clearly trying to get in with the VIPs. And he asked for me. Again, there was something that happened. I defied him. He was only 20 years old. So I was very curious when I saw him first, because very out of place. There were no 20-year-olds there. Right. And there were only very few children, I should say. The children were like the most valued commodity, and we were brought in often later. You know, it was not like there's an orgy and there's the children to be used. No, it was all very organized. The children would be brought in. I was often waiting with a handler in another room for quite a while, and then we were brought in, and then I often had to make the men feel comfortable, the new ones, and that was filmed or photographed secretly.
And partly about blackmail, or the potential of blackmail, that was part of that matter. Yeah.
Sure. And no one ever said no. 200 men or something.
Wow. I mean, I guess they got there in the first place, so they were...
That's what I realized much later. You know, when I was a child, I was always thinking, well, the next man who's going to come in is going to say, I'm not doing it, you know. But so I was really kind of always surprised that they would, because I didn't look older. First of all, I was very young. I was 6, and it's 6 to 11. But I always just looked exactly my age, and I was small, so there was no question. Like, it's not like, well, maybe 16. No, not at all.
You were 10 at this point.
Yes.
Right?
And so the 20-year-old came and made some snide comment to me. Now, you little whore, you like your job? Because I smiled at him. So now by this time I was just so attuned. Again, now I'm just doing what comes naturally. I don't even know, but I'm saying, you think I like it here? And I was very angry, which usually sometimes there was a way to express anger, but it was always in that dynamic, in having to do with what this man likes.
Right.
Specifically sexually.
And you were like usually accommodating them and what they were looking for. And in this case, you were clearly being defiant.
I was defiant because he likes defiance, and he liked defiance. And he was shocked. He was also young. It was his first time that he was brought there. He was completely shocked. And when I saw him, I just got this sense of him. Like, it was a very strong feeling I had when I just saw him walking. And I thought, he's too hurt. He's young, and he's too hurt. That was my feeling. But I had a lot of feeling for this person, just seeing him. And so then he went and to the boss of the network, and just in the group, just went to the group and just asked for me. It's just very unorthodox. Like, you didn't just go and ask. You know, it wasn't like, this is a brothel, I want that one.
Right.
That was not really how it was done.
It's usually top down, like
sneaky or subtle or whatever, or with a nod or whatever, but not just like, hey, you know, I want.
Yeah.
So
meaning you actually saw him going.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there was an orgy, and there was another man who had been sitting with me. So he went and asked for permission.
Right. Being young.
Being 20.
Experienced with the nodding and the winking and all.
Also, he didn't care.
Right.
And he didn't care because he had a gun, and he wasn't afraid to use it. And that's why he was respected in the circles, because he killed.
Okay.
So he took me to a room, and we were taken by a handler who was very pissed off at having to be the gopher. But he took me to a beautiful room in this small castle where we were in Belgium, near Brussels. And he didn't touch me. And he basically just stood there and said, you know, what you want to do. And I thought, well, I kind of want to go to sleep. That was my thought, but I didn't think I could say that. But he didn't touch me. He didn't touch me for 6 months. Because he wanted it to come from me. And then he also protected me. And I had my first therapy sessions with him, where he was kind of trying to find out about the network. And so I was starting to open up to him, and I told him certain things, but not everything. But I did tell him about the boy who was sacrificed. That was the first time I shared about it, and I cried. And he was just listening. He wasn't really emotional at all. He was just listening, but I felt this, like, once again, there's a father figure, and he's listening to me. And 11 to 20, it doesn't matter if you're a sex slave. I did not feel like his equal at all.
Right. It didn't make 20 or the older gentleman didn't make too much difference from that point of view.
Yeah.
It made some, right, I guess.
Well, it was better looking. A lot better looking.
Right.
So that was better. But no, and then also he was very tall. 6 foot, over 6 feet. So he was sort of getting a lay of the land, and he was particularly interested in the boss, the cabinet minister. He wanted to know about him, who was very sadistic. And I shared certain things again, but always very careful. I was always very careful. And I also knew that once you're protected, this is very dangerous when you're protected, because then you get this other status. And what had happened before, I was favored. And also, now, I talk about this, but children were getting killed. Children were getting killed. And I was, the body that I saw the first day, that was not the only body that I saw, and the boy was not the only boy that I saw killed. So children were getting killed. There were 7 children at the time, 5 years that I was there, 7 children. Personally witnessed. I know that these things were going on, but I was around or personally witnessed 7 children. And I knew that when you are favored by a perpetrator, there's always a danger that when he drops you, that you're going to be killed. Because you become a problem, or you may become a problem. So I knew that I was always very, very careful.
Is that like a knowing too much sort of problem, that you know them too well?
Yes. You have information on them.
And their vulnerabilities, and they feel
right.
like the American.
Right. They've made themselves vulnerable to you, so now you may know too much.
Yeah,
I think so.
off, yeah.
I think so. I've heard another survivor say that it was because they were afraid you would then go and talk because you were jealous or you were upset. But I always had questions about that. Maybe that too. Maybe there was always certainly the fear that we would go and talk. But in reality, no one wanted to hear anyway, so I'm not sure. They were very, very blatant, and sort of the fact of the extreme nature of what they were doing was the best coverage. No one would believe it.
Right. And we've, we were living in, at that time, that was the time. That was like nobody could possibly believe it, and now we're just creeping up on a time where people are starting to be willing to fathom. And again, that's why, what you have to say is so important.
Right. Thank goodness that this is a time, because it would be very difficult never to be able to be heard.
Yeah.
But I didn't expect to be heard, I should say that, because I wasn't heard for many, many years. The norm was that I was not going to be heard, and that I just feel, I didn't actually have a lot of situations, because I would just feel that this person is not, they're not going to hear it, so don't even go there. So I spoke very little about it. Even many therapists don't really believe it. So, and I did have a therapist once say that they didn't believe me. Therapist office.
Wow.
Yeah. So first of all, this was a dangerous man. He was liked me, but he was dangerous. Or he respected me because I defied him. And after 6 months, well, I did start it, but I started it because my mother got in between a little bit. She got all excited about this when she saw him. In passing, she was picking me up and he was dropping me off, literally.
Okay.
So she saw him. She got all excited. And he had started to tell me that my mother was no good. Offering himself as, the better substitute.
Right.
So I told her she was no good. And then she wanted to punish me. And, she had no boundaries, so it was severe. She stopped giving me food, basically. No more food. And then I was getting taken to a place where this gangster never was. I was still being abused. It took about a month of no food. when I would steal some food when I could, but she wasn't feeding me. And then something occurred, something strange occurred with a girl who was the daughter of the contact person, the countess who was the contact person who called my mother up, was basically telling her where to bring me.
The girl that you were in school with?
The girl that I was in school with. Yeah. So this girl was also abused in the network. Even though she wasn't a slave, but she was from the bloodline, she was aristocratic, but she was being abused publicly also at these orgies. And she had been abused by her father when she was very little, that's clear. And this girl, so it was difficult with her because we were friends in regular life, and then in the network, not so much. So, for me, if I didn't have the men like me, then I could always be gotten rid of, and that always meant death. For her, it didn't really mean that. But it was always difficult with her because there was a lot of... Well, I didn't think I was competitive, but there was competition, I think, yeah. And envy. And I don't think she had a sense of her innocent self either. You know, I think she had been abused very early on. And she had actually, there was a physical evidence of it. Because the first time she brought me to her house, she played a sexual game. We played a sexual game. And so she put a pencil up her vagina. We were 3 years old. She put a pencil up her vagina. It went all the way up. So I tried, didn't go up, and I didn't understand. So her hymen had already been broken. So in retrospect, I realized that even at age 3, she'd already been raped. So she was very much in need of the male attention in a way, like taking that as like, that's the only thing I've got. That's it. And so I stood in her way. And she set up a rape with boys from the outside. She set me up to get raped. She was there, she led me to the place and then left, and then these 3 boys were there to rape me. And there's more to this. It was all very complex. It was about a very specific thing that she was doing that for. It had to do with finding out that there was no sex, but I wasn't getting raped by the gangster, by the young man that all the girls wanted, because he was good looking. So she found I had revealed that information to her. So she was going to get me raped. Maybe show me what I was missing or but it was clearly about that. It was in response to that. And one of the boys who was there, who raped me, he was 14, and I connected with him, and he was sorry afterwards. And he wanted to see me again. And he apologized. And he wanted to take care of me, and he got rid of the other boys, and I connected very deeply with this 14-year-old boy who seemed really big to me. And again, I was just around my 11th birthday now. So that had happened, and then I had been raped again, but I hadn't been raped for 6 months in the network, and then I was taken to this other place by my mother, where, again, I didn't think, I found out later the man who raped me there was high place official in a world power. Never thought to even look him up until, it just dawned on me, and there he was. once I saw this gangster again, I gave myself to him. I felt so guilty that I'd liked somebody else. And I gave myself to him. And as soon as that started, he started the playing out of his trauma that had made him, the killer that he was. So that was very extreme. The abuse was very extreme. The betrayals were very extreme. And there was a big lead up because there was, even though I was cautious, I was also, I didn't have a lot of options. And when it came to love, there was a lot more reflection there than I was getting at home, for example. He was seeing things that were not being seen. He saw. And there was a sense of humor, intelligence, and beauty, all things that my mother never reflected. So there was a lot there that I needed. So there was a lot of attachment, and then the abuse was extreme. Extreme. Physical abuse. Slept with my mother in front of me. Just completely stabbed me. And took me to the south of France to have me heal from the stab, because he meant it as a romantic thing, so that I would have something to remember him by. He stabbed me in the back of the knee, and he had a slight limp. He had been stabbed in the back of the knee at one point. So he perpetuated his trauma onto me, and
kind of like a blood bond.
Yeah.
Feeling like.
Well, like all abusers, but more intensely, there's always a contract, even though you're a child. I mean, I'm speaking contract in maybe the psychic sense.
Right.
There's the contract because the abusers are always looking at some kind of a part of themselves,
right.
A part that they need to reject, or a part that they need to vilify, or need to think is dirty. It's all about, what they have to shun from their own consciousness, that they are afraid is there. And they're afraid that it's there because it has one time been imposed. And so that child self I become the physical representation of that aspect of themselves. So with him, it was just elongated, and it was just very intense of his own. He stabbed me in the backs of the knees twice. Once it was this romantic thing, and he took me to the south of France and on the Mediterranean, and had time there to heal. And the second time it was in anger. And he started to reveal little by little, because he was still young enough, his own trauma. That was what he actually stabbed me in the back of the knees in the same house that it had happened to him, in his parents' house where he was living, by his father, who had found him with his mother in bed and blamed him because he was already raping his son. So he was getting raped by both parents separately. And when his father found him with his mother, he ran after him and wanted to kill him and maimed him. And then that father literally drove him to his first, what's it called, like bank robbery. Like he drove his son to the bank.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he got caught, he robbed the bank.
To actually try to rob the bank.
He did, he robbed the bank, he was caught.
Yeah.
And his father was also caught, but his father was let off, and he went to jail. So this father was constantly making wanted his son to be the bad guy, very badly, obviously, and he could be the good guy.
Layers.
Sorry, there's a lot of layers there.
Yeah,
I got very deep with this person.
It is something.
he's the one that rescued me.
Right.
So it had reached its zenith. I was supposed to be killed. That's the final, rejection. And he rejected me. I was in a house. This was the house. It was the house of the boss of the network who was there. It was the early stages of an orgy. There were children there, but it was not in that context yet. It was early. There were just a few people there. But I was taken to a handler. He was an important person. He was always the middleman. He was not just like the other ones. He was sort of in charge of the other ones, hobnobbing with the big shots. That he was a businessman. So I was delivered to him, and he started to he was sort of happy he could finally get rid. I was always a problem. I was always considered a problem for speaking up or not following perfectly along. So he was happy to be rid of me, and so the first thing he did is he grabbed me by the hand like that, and then he put out a cigarette on my arm. So that's this scar here. When I stretch my arm out, it becomes like a line, but he had grabbed me this way and then put out the cigarette. Oh, it was more here then. And as this happened, the gangster is standing there and he's laughing at me. Like, don't count on me. And I was once again, taken over by some higher power, and I just straightened myself. I never felt this happen. My consciousness was just completely merging with his, and the thought was, I don't need you. And it was completely locked again in this energetic lock with this person. And I saw him being very, like the first time he was moved, and I thought I'd gotten through, but I was...
Which person are you talking
So
about?
I'm being tortured by one man.
Yes.
But the gangster's standing there.
Yeah.
And he's looking at me. And he's laughing.
Yeah.
And that's the person I'm connecting with while I'm being tortured. And I'm not feeling the torture. There's been some confusion about that.
Yeah, so he was kind of said, I don't need you anymore. And this is
I said that.
But then
Yeah.
this is when you told him.
Oh, well, he was much worse than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. He rejected me. I mean, it was all repetition. It was even things that didn't make sense, like how he was yelling at me when he was rejecting me, when he was kicking me out of the room that we were in. It was strutting. He was talking about strutting, which is something that he did. He said I was an arrogant whore. There was nothing worse than an arrogant whore. There's these things that he was saying, though, that were, at one point he used a male term. He was just like repeating. But I felt it, definitely. I took it, and I felt it. But then he was present there, and he was laughing, like, don't count on me. And then I shot back, and I defied him once again, and this defiance touched him. And I was taken away. So there was one adult, and then there were children. The children were made to take me. And I don't remember how my clothes were taken off, but I was taken naked so this politician, who was the boss of the network, there was a room in his house, a small room, that had a very large butcher's block. This too made sense later on, when I found out how this man had started up. It made sense that he would have a butcher's block. So there was a large butcher's block that had straps in it, and I was strapped onto this butcher's block. Now there's one adult there who really wants me to suffer, and then there's I keep thinking 4 or 5, but I think it was 4 children that were there. The girl, the daughter of the aristocrat, she was originally there, but she was not in the room. So the 4 children who were there were not there, not part of the family, so they were being indoctrinated. So they were being made to do this so that they would become numb and used to and feel like they're perpetrators and they're guilty. So they were made to torture me. And I got very, very high right away. And I got, I'd had a lot of help spiritually over the years, things that happened, and I'd seen light, and I'd had reassurances and benign feeling and benign presence and very loving presence. So there's a lot of help. And there too, just immediately, I was completely high, and I could just see everything as energy. And there was just energetic forms. And I was completely blissed out.
Bliss.
For a while. For a while, in the beginning. So there's maybe the body reaction to the trauma, where the freeze state, and then the cortisol that's released in the system and so forth. So there was definitely, that was also happening, but also the spiritual sensation of seeing everything as energetic beings, no good or bad, just forms of energy and light. And so the children were made to torture me. But I didn't feel, for the longest time, I felt it, but I didn't have maybe the human consciousness of the ego of, like, this is happening and it's hurting. It wasn't really like that. I felt it, but I don't feel like my ego was getting in the way.
Right.
There wasn't really, and I was really high. So I felt it, but it didn't really bother me. Even though there were definitely, you can see and it's all over my body. So they were using various small things. There was a crate under the butcher's block that had these small instruments in it, like a penknife, a corkscrew, a fish hook. There was a belt with nails that was sort of put around my arm. So the nails on the inside. Various tools. There was an apple core that the man used. That was painful. So I was strapped down, and for some reason it seems to go very quickly. And I'm starting to think that I didn't get through to this man. And it's going very quickly, like I'm completely covered with blood. And the man was, somehow he got in, as things progressed, and I was just getting completely cut up. He got the idea that my right foot should be cut off. And there was one boy there, he sent the boy had the fish hook. He sent the boy, the fish hook was scary, because it would go under the skin first and then pull it. But he sent the boy off to get a cleaver to hack off my foot. So I could hobble around. He said, so you can hobble around like your boyfriend, meaning the gangster who limped.
Right.
So, and then I started to slowly, he got in a bad mood, and I didn't really understand why he was in a bad mood. And I thought he was very happy to get rid of me.
Right.
And I didn't understand why he was in a bad mood. I had this question. And I started to lose the high, and I started to feel that I'm not ready, and started to feel afraid. He decided to turn me around because I was too bloody on the front. So he just undid the straps. Well, the thing that happened, the last thing that happened is the youngest girl there, he was starting to threaten the children. Like if they didn't, he was in a bad mood, so he started to say, if you don't, you're next if you're not gonna. And she had the penknife, and she was supposed to stab me, and so they undid the strap, and my arm was like that. And he was pushing her to stab me in the arm. and she was scared. And her fear was the scariest thing to me, that her hesitation. So she did it, and then she got scared and she let go, and the knife was sticking in my arm. And he got angrier and angrier, and she got really scared, and so when she pulled it out, she twisted it. And then suddenly I felt that, and I felt everything all over. And suddenly, the itching of the blood dripping everywhere, it just became completely unbearable. I couldn't, my nerves just all awoke all at once. And I got really scared. And suddenly, now they're turning me around. And there's like this black. The wood is black because there's been so many, I figure there's so many children that have died here, and I'm next, and I don't feel ready. And I'm just thinking of all the children that have died, that there was nobody to love them. I thought that in that moment there's nobody to love me, and there's nobody to love those children enough for them to even live. And I became pretty desperate, and very desperate. And then the door opened, and I'm thinking, now there's the boy with the cleaver. Now they're going to hack off my foot. But it was somebody else. It was one of the friends of the boss who said it's over. And the handler was in disbelief. He said, "No, you can't be serious." He said, "Yep, that's it. You can all go." And the handler said, "No, she's going to give us trouble." And he had no power there. So he and the children left, and I was just left there by myself in the room. Then I realized that one of the children had brought my clothes. And I realized this bond that we couldn't express, but it was really there. And I just broke out in tears. And I saw the clothes there. And realizing we're connected, there was such a sweet gesture to bring my clothes. They could have left them where they'd taken them off, But this child had picked them up and brought them over. So I just really appreciated that. And I was just so grateful. Grateful for that gesture. And then I was just grateful for everything. It was very hard to get down. I was in really bad shape. Full of holes. And it was not easy to put my clothes on because I was in such bad shape. And I made my way. Well, there was a bathroom there. I tried to clean myself up, and it was very difficult to look at myself because I was really in very bad shape. And I didn't look like I was going to survive. I didn't look like I was going to live much longer. And I went outside. I shuffled outside. And my jeans, I wore, again, I had such gratitude for everything. And I had loose jeans, bell-bottom jeans, so I was so grateful that they were loose. And my t-shirt, was whatever. But they were getting stained and everything was, So as I walked out, I saw the gangster. He had a girl with him, and he was basically had this girl. He was raping that girl right there. But it didn't do anything to me. It was just not. I wasn't really. There was something else. He put her down and he sent her off, and he came to me, and he said, "I was waiting for you." And he guided me. And I was just, again, grateful. that he was waiting, that he had been waiting. I didn't know. I was taken to an office. There's the boss of the network, the gangster, the friend who had stopped it, who was like a lawyer type, and the girl. She was there. This girl was maybe 9 years old, 8 or 9, I think 9. I hadn't seen her before. I remember what she looks like. Now, the boss of the network starts to speak, and he says, you know, so you were saved, you were let go, you're going to be let go, but we don't just do that, you know. We don't just do that here. You can't just leave. Someone has to die. So he said, is it going to be you or is it going to be her? And that was the girl that was there. And I'd been through things like that before with animals. So it wasn't a real question. Like I knew it wasn't a question, it was more about what do they want and how can I just do what they need me to do most effectively so that there's the least amount of energy and time wasted and that it could be what may be the most humane.
Right.
So I try to tune in, like, what was this? What do they want? So the gangster was standing against and he was like flipping his foot. He was like flipping. So I'm just getting this attention of this foot flipping and there's something like he wants me to know. And I think, he wanted me to be jealous. He wanted me to be jealous. He wants me to say that it's her. I should say it's her. She should be killed because he did that for that reason. I realized he did that in front of me so that I would be jealous and I would want her dead. And I'm getting that. I wasn't jealous at all, but I felt that. So I said her, and he said, the boss, well, and you're gonna have to kill her. And then I thought, okay, well, I could, I'd rather go myself. I'm barely alive. It's not like I knew I didn't want to do that. I never wanted to live after I did it. And then I just thought, just for a second, I didn't really think it through like an adult, but it was just something that I knew from what I'd experienced, that if I had said I'm not doing it, that she would have been killed in front of me, probably in a worse way, to show me, to punish me. That was always, definitely, going to happen. So I realized that it would be the most humane that I do it. And that there's no way that she's going to survive the night either way. So the gangster took me to a bathroom again to try to clean me up. And I saw a look for a moment, and he just saw me, and he just wondered if I was going to live. And he tried to cover it, but I saw it too. And he drove me to a house, like a villa, outside of Brussels. And the regulars were there. So these are all Belgians and Frenchmen that are in the Belgian section of the network. The boss was also there. And when we arrived, I noticed that the gangster had always gotten a lot of respect, and I noticed that they're sort of derisive of him, that they're like not caring so much about him, and they're sort of laughing at him, and I immediately sensed the difference, and I'm not sure what's going on. We are led into an old dentist's office. That was the walls were knocked out in it, but there was a dentist's chair there, and the girl was tied up to the dentist's chair. And so the night was. The girl was tortured, I was made to torture her. I was being taught how to torture because they were getting off on it. And the gangster was always verbal, taught me that I should strike but be in attunement with her so that I would get the electrical shock that she was feeling empathically, and that is then the sexual arousal. But I didn't have any feelings towards that girl, for any desire, certainly, but also any envy at all, or for jealousy. This didn't exist. And I didn't have that reaction, but I did, do what I was made to do. And then he gave me tons of coke, or he was doing a lot of coke. He gave me tons of coke. We would go off in the corner, and I overheard men saying that he had sold his life, and for what? For that little whore. And I started to question him, and I realized that he made a deal while I was being tortured. He made a deal with the boss that he was going to work for him as his left-hand man, whatever. He was going to be at his service. So he lost his power in the network because he became a servant of the boss for my life. But then there was also a sense that I wasn't supposed to survive anyway. So this is this is not really an overview, but I can say that I went through the experience. I did kill the girl. I got myself into the space where the girl was completely not there anymore. I walked around and I just started to remember all the things that I had been through, all the ways in which I had been made to feel powerless, all the men that had raped me, not one that had stopped himself. And then I started to think about my mother, and my mother, who had just never ever shown me any love at all. And I just started to get aroused in that way. And when I struck, I had been told that I should slit her throat. And I struck her in the belly. And even in the moment that I struck, it became this incredibly dense moment where I felt a release, and all the powerlessness that had made me feel so frustrated, that all this energy was still there and all the anger was still there. There was this channel, this offer to channel it in this way, in this most destructive way. But in that moment, there was this complete release. And I felt what a baby should feel. I felt innocent and completely powerful in this dense, dense moment of the strike itself. And I struck, and then I heard a scream, and then I realized that was me screaming as I did it. And I struck it in the belly, and that was, I knew I had wanted to strike myself in my mother's belly as a fetus. I just had wanted to kill myself in my mother's belly. And I fell to the floor. And I started to leave the body. And the senses started to revert. And I was very happy to go. And, well, it wasn't finished. There was an awareness in the room that I had to... Well, the gangster was crying next to me for a little while. But then something happened, and there was this light in front of me. This beautiful, warm, round sun. And I was getting all this information, and as I had before. And I was getting all this information through that light. And I was made aware that she wasn't able to die, that she wasn't dead, that she wasn't able to die, and that the gangster, who was the only person left in the room, he wasn't going to do it. He was too scared. So I had this thing put in front of me, like, you have to go back because you have to help her. And I resisted it. I didn't want to. I really wanted to leave because I thought, if I die, then the gangster is off the hook with this boss, the politician, and he doesn't have to work for him, and then he will be free. And that's my romantic idea, that I'm going to die and then he's going to be free. And he's going to be saved. But I had to come back to help the girl. So I broke through the resistance, and the mental yes, just everything reverted, started to reverse. Because I'd already lost sense. The senses had started to revert. I'd lost the taste, the sense and sensation of the tongue in the mouth and everything. I'd lost everything, and it was reverse. It was coming back. And I crawled over to her. She was on the floor too. And then I was in a divine space. There, like, it wasn't me. There was a girl. She was afraid to go because she was afraid that she wouldn't be, that she would stop existing. And I assured her, it's completely channeling, it's not at all me, that she would continue to exist, that she would be her, and that she was lucky that she could go, and that I was going to have to stay, and that she was lucky to go. And I rubbed her here. I don't know why, it just came naturally. I just rubbed her in between the eyebrows, and she passed. And then this light came over me, and then I went. And I went, and I had, let's say, an audience on the other side of the ether. And there was a different realm, beyond the physical. And I saw my teacher, and I was greeted with a joke. There was something very ironic, and that was immediately addressed, and this play of light and dark, I was given this experience now, so that I would know what to strive for, and also some information. And I asked about the girl. I said, none of your business really, but she's okay, She just went through a very difficult test. She's fine. Some questions, some answers, some not so, some cryptic. And then returned. And I don't know how much time passed, but my body was clean. I was glowing, at least 5 pounds heavier. The wounds were dry and clean.
So one question with regards to your personal journey, which we're talking about, and your healing in particular, how does one deal with having to take someone's life? And how do you heal from that?
Right. I'm not sure if I'll ever heal completely from it. I did carry this burden, though, very, very strongly for most of my life. And that was the purpose, for me to carry that, because I couldn't speak out. For example, the strongest reason, one of the strongest reasons why, was not so much because I would be killed, but it was because I thought that I would be called out as a perpetrator, because I felt that I was, because at 11 years old, I was given the choice, and I had taken a life. So I had obviously worked in therapy, I had heard some good people tell me that I was a victim too. And I didn't believe it. I wanted to believe them, but I didn't believe it. So it wasn't until 2013, writing about the experience again, and I suddenly put it together. There were certain little things that were missing from the memory. And in particular, what I remembered is what I had always done in the network. That I'd always thought about the way to do the action that I was made to do, that I knew it wasn't a choice, and was made to do it in the way that would cause the least harm. And then in this situation, that least harm meant that I should kill her. And I realized that it wasn't the guilt. I had a guilt complex. I lived with this vast guilt complex that everything that I ever did or said, I always went back and thought I must have done something wrong in it. So it's not introspection, it's a guilt complex, just constantly going back over every little interaction. I couldn't really function very well because I was always, somebody wouldn't call back and I would worry that I'd done something to upset them, and I would maybe even ask them and they'd maybe say, no, not at all, it has nothing to do with you, basically.
Yeah.
But that just hung over my life like a cloud for most of, so 13 I was, it was right before, I was 49. It was right before my 50th birthday. So from 11 to 49, I had this tremendous guilt complex. And then when I fully understood that, so I had to internally believe it, So once that happens, it was the birth, I call it the birth of self-esteem. When I knew that it's not my fault. But to take a life, I did that anyway, I went through that action of taking that life. I think of this girl every day, I know what she looked like. I haven't felt anything, but I think of her every day, and I am thinking of small ways, rituals to honor the children that were killed in the network. The ones that I saw and ones that I didn't see.
And what of your experience, let's say your spiritual experience of having heard some confirmation that she is safe at that time?
Mm-hmm. That's a different realm.
Yeah.
So, yes, in that moment, I wanted to know, I heard that then. So it's, the spiritual in that sense, it's separate as long as we're in the body and working out. You just have to work that psychology and go back and really know it by feeling it.
Right.
So I don't feel guilty today about it. I actually feel that because of that experience, I understand killers. I understand how they would become addicted to that moment.
Right.
I understand it, and I understand the projection. I understand the So this girl, when I struck, she wasn't that girl at all. So in the biggest sense, you have to dissociate and you have to project onto the victim in order to do what you do. So that had been done to me, but now I was doing it, and so she wasn't that girl at all. She was my mother, and then she was me at the essence of it. I was killing myself. And that insanity is necessary to kill?
I think this is a great time to take a break.
Yes, I know it's been hard for you guys, I know.
Okay, so I have to say that when I first watched these first two parts after we had filmed them, and even the rest of our team when we watched these parts, everyone had some pretty visceral sort of feelings or reactions that came up after watching this whole thing. You know, there's a lot of stuff that gets covered. She's obviously been through such an incredible like something that you almost can't even put into words. It's unbelievable what experiences she has had leading up to this point in her life, especially when she was a child and was going through this stuff. And that brings up a lot of stuff, because what you begin to feel is that this stuff is real. This stuff does happen in our world, and this is happening through the people that we just would not imagine are doing this sort of stuff, the people that we put in positions of power and so forth. And a lot of this is starting to come down. We're seeing a lot of different things happen, but you know, this is really humanity facing a dark aspect of itself that we need to face, that we need to move through. And so you may be feeling a lot of different things as we go through this and as we look at this. And so we wanted to really encourage, we wanted to really push for, if you are feeling a lot of different stuff, as I did when I first watched this, I actually went and I meditated right afterwards for about 20 or 25 minutes, just processing the different things that I had heard and what it had brought up. Because that's important, right? When we watch something and it brings something forward, it's for us to observe. It's for us to understand, what am I feeling with this? What am I understanding? Because what we're going through as we see this stuff is not just stuff that we're feeling within ourselves. That's part of it. That's a big part of it, right? When we hear this, we feel this stuff within ourselves, right? Because it touches on so many different aspects of lack of empowerment, or what it is that we choose to support, or the darker aspects of humanity and thus ourselves, right? All these different things. But we're also going to be going through and processing some of what the collective feels and believes around this stuff, because we are all tapped into that collective consciousness. So it's important for us to do this individual work here as we observe and as we hear these stories, and really move through some of the different emotions and different aspects of humanity that are being asked to be moved through at this time as we go through this stuff. So if it's helpful, you know, take a few moments, 20 minutes or whatever you feel, an hour, you know, write out some of the stuff you're feeling, really explore this, have a conversation with someone that you may have watched this with, or perhaps you say, hey, so check out these videos to a friend or something like that, and you guys can chat it out after. Don't just kind of bury the emotions or pretend that they're not there, or maybe not want to face them. This is a very, very important aspect to this entire thing, and it's why we chose to release this interview and do it the way we did, and it's also why we chose to sort of look at Anneka's story as a whole, because her wisdom through this is truly one of the biggest antidotes to the cabal from an emotional point of view, right? It's very, very important what she shares as we go through this. And we're going to get into that a lot more in part 3 and part 4. But below this video, you're going to see a link in the description to a meditation that you can do and you can download that'll just help us kind of create a little bit of space, a little bit of guidance to open up the doors to kind of process a little further what we just told. So we highly encourage that to go through that, because, you know, again, we don't want to see just kind of the feelings come up and then we just kind of bury them. We want to take the time to go through this, and obviously we know and we recognize that what was just seen was quite intense, and we don't want the perception of, oh, that's just negative, to be placed on this, because this is much more important than trying to view it in that manner, but actually viewing it for what it truly is. So we'll catch you in part 3 and part 4, where we begin to go through the entire healing journey, the healing process that Anneke went through. And this is where things get, I mean, aside from the intensity of the story, this is where things get really, really important on a consciousness level. So be sure to check those ones out.